Good morning, everybody. I was looking at my notes. It's 10 o'clock, and I'm Tim Harris. It's time for 10 with Tim. I need to pay attention to what I'm doing. I'm glad you're with me. I'm excited about our passage today, Genesis chapter 31, verses 1 to 21. It's getting good, and if you're just now dropping in with us, it's probably a strange place to begin in the story, because it's kind of the end of this, beginning of the end of the episode between Jacob and his father-in-law Laban. So as we begin, Jacob's beginning to understand that Laban's sons are kind of giving him a lot of side eye, for the simple reason that they recognize that Jacob is getting richer and richer and richer, and Laban's flocks are dwindling. And it's not so much, it's not that Jacob's presence is bringing anything other than blessing for Laban. As we know, Laban has got more than he had when Jacob arrived, but it's just that God continues to bless Jacob in such a magnificent way, it makes everyone else look poor around him. You know what I'm saying? But Jacob recognizes that the brothers are looking at him, and that Laban now is like I said, giving him some side eye, and so he realizes, man, it's time to get out of here. Again, it's the same kind of thing that happens throughout the stories of the patriarchs. Their prosperity, their blessing begins to cause problems with those around them. There's not enough room, so to speak, for what God is continuing to pour out into Jacob's lap, and so Jacob calls his wives out into the field. Again, it highlights the secrecy of what they're doing, because they know Laban. Everybody knows Laban, and everybody knows that if Laban knows what they're thinking, he will find a way to undermine them. Now, he'll do it, in a big way. He'll slap them on the back and offer to pay them, but we all know that Laban is really only looking out for Laban. And so Jacob begins to, explain to the wives. He needs these sister wives. Jacob needs Leah and Rachel. He needs them to consent and to be on his side. And he may or may not know exactly what they're going to say. He's asking a lot of them. They have to leave the only home they've ever known. They have to leave their father, their brothers. They have to leave their land and come and follow him back to the land of Abraham, the land of Canaan. And so he begins to make his case. Notice in these passages how many times Jacob says, you know how hard I've worked. You know how hard I've worked. It's as if Jacob continues to emphasize his own integrity. And I believe he has been a man of integrity, although Laban is not. You know how hard I've worked, he says to his wives. You know how your daddy's done me, how he's changed the deal, 10 times. Now, whether it's literally 10 times or it's the Hebrew way of saying, time after time. Every time I think I know, what's happened, and Laban pulls a rug out from under my feet. He keeps changing the deal, and I'm done with him. I'm done. We need to go. And on top of that, he begins to explain, I had a vision. I've had a dream from the Lord. Now, interesting here. Notice how in the dream, Jacob understands why it is that his flocks have multiplied. Remember yesterday we were talking about how Jacob was doing this bark trick where he peeled the bark and let the sheep and the goats look at something striped when they were mating, and then they would have striped babies. And yeah, that's all superstition. That's crazy. But in the dream and in Jacob's explanation to his wives, he explains to them what God was doing. See, there's always this vast difference between what we're doing and what God is doing. And what God does is ultimately what brings the blessing. You understand? So Jacob's doing this silly, bark, tree superstition, and he thinks he's, helping things out, but truly God himself was in control of the flocks and the mating and the breeding and all of that. So just recognize that. Jacob now knows where the blessings come from, and it wasn't because of his, animal husbandry, wizardry or whatever. You with me? And so then in verses 14 through 16, Leah and Rachel respond. They say, yeah, our daddy hadn't been a prince to us either. He wasted all our money. He took our hope chest and all of that. Now he's left them with nothing too. Laban would literally steal from his own daughters, and incidentally, steal, is kind of one of the main verbs in this whole passage. It's all related to Laban. And so the women, they consent. We're going to leave, but we're going to leave in secret. So while Laban is in the middle of the sheep shearing, which is kind of a big deal, and it's off site, it's a big festival and all of that. While they're away from home, basically, Jacob and his wives decide to load up the minivan with the kids and their belongings, and they're going to leave in secret. So kind of deceiving Laban. Laban doesn't know about their plan, but they're leaving when he can't stop them. And so that's the passage today. I just want to call your attention to one little thing, because I think it's kind of like, what? It mentions there in verse 19, Rachel stole her father's household idols. What? That's just really interesting. Household idols. It's the first we've heard of this. What? Now, there was a little verse yesterday. I didn't mention it. It's a certain controversy around the way you translate chapter 30, verse, I think it's 27, where Laban's talking about, I know that God has only blessed me because of you. But there's a big controversy around the translation there, because honestly, one of the ways to translate that would be, I have divined, in other words, I've done some, pagan weirdness, and in my pagan weirdness, I have divined that the Lord's only blessed me because of you. It's that real strange reference to divination, as if, Laban does some sort of fortune telling, pagan weirdness. And now we know he does. So in some ways, I kind of could go back and support that translation, because he's got these household idols. He's got these little, fake gods on the mantle. What? And now Rachel takes them. We thought Rachel was a believer. She believes enough. She believed enough in Jacob's God to leave her home and go and, cast her lot, with her whole future with Jacob's God. I mean, she believes enough, but in this moment of uncertainty, she sticks the household gods in her purse. What? Again, it's just so strange. I know that moving is one of the most stressful things you'll ever do. I know that, and she's leaving the only home she's ever known, and the only people she's ever known, and all of her friends since kindergarten. All of that. I understand that, and I suppose in that moment she believes in God enough, but at the same time, she gets the little pocket gods, the little figurines off the mantle, just to have a backup, just in case. These are going to figure into tomorrow's story in kind of a big way. So read ahead and understand the importance of these idols. But I just want to point out to you, we're like, what is up with her? Thought she was a believer, and now she got, idols for a backup. Well, I just remind you, we do the same sort of thing. Now, we're much too sophisticated to worship, literal idols. But make no mistake, we still have, backup gods, pocket gods in our lives too. In other words, we don't worship, like little figurines, but we definitely put our faith in things other than the only God who can support, sustain, and give us the security that we need. Just, if you want to identify the little gods in your life, I'll just give you a couple of questions. First off, what is it that the non-Christians around you worship and put their faith in? Because we have a tendency to borrow our gods from other people around us. So whatever it is that the people around you talk about, whatever it is they build their life around, you're likely, even though you're a believer, you're likely to borrow their God, their false source of security, and kind of put that in your pocket as a backup too. What determines every day whether you're happy or sad? Because that's a good indication of what controls you. And if that's not God, if that's not your faith, if that's not your relationship with Christ, then you've let something else take the place of Christ in your life. What is it that's going to determine whether you're happy or sad today? What is it that you dream about or obsess over? Or I could say it this way: what is it in your life that you end up having to make a lot of excuses for? Whether it's like spending, because a lot of us, we get our security, we get our boost out of the power, the privilege we have in buying things. It's funny how something so small can become like a little pocket God. I mean, you believe in God, but you find yourself, having to keep a lot of secrets around the way you manage your money or the way you manage a habit. It's interesting. Here's one. What do you turn to when you're hurting? What is it you think, oh man, just a little bit of this gonna make me feel better? It's a really good indication of where actually you have, put your faith, your trust, your hope, your heart. And one last thing, in the Old Testament, when it comes to idolatry, you'll notice that whatever it is they're trusting in their God for, God himself, the only true God, he has a way of withholding that so that they recognize the hopelessness of trusting in their little fake God. So if Baal is the God of rain and weather and fertility, then God will just send them a drought, so that they know Baal can't help you. You understand? So I just ask you, what is it in your life you're most disappointed with? Most disappointed about? Because it's very likely God is withholding that blessing from you, So if you want to know where the real God in your life is, just take a look at where is the drought in your life? If you look at the drought in your life, you'll probably find a pretty good clue as to what it is that you have elevated, what blessing, what gift you've elevated above the giver of all things. Does that make any sense? That's why I was looking at my notes when I started. I really was thinking about all of these things and wanted to try to explain to you the way in which you and I, even though we're believers, we have a tendency to have a little backup, gods, put our faith and hope in other little things, just in case, God doesn't come through. God will always come through, but sometimes in our moments of fear and uncertainty, something about us, we look for backup. So Rachel, on her way out the door, takes the household gods off the mantle and sticks them in her purse, and off they go. Laban will pursue them tomorrow. Chapter 31, verses 22 to 55. Genesis chapter 31, verses 22 to 55. That's for tomorrow. Stay with them. To get to Laban, hits them on the trail tomorrow, and Laban and Jacob have their final big confrontations. Good stuff. Stay in the Word. Have a good day today. Stay dry. It's a nasty day out there, but God is good. So trust Him, love Him, and let Him bless your life. I'll see you in the morning, Lord willing. 10 o'clock for 10 with Tim.